Okay, everybody, welcome back to Gut Check Time. I'm your host, and today we will be talking about college football week 5. I'm going to recap some of the big games and talk about them, break them down a little bit. But first, can you please hit that like button and please hit that subscribe button if you want to see more content like this in the future? And let's get into it. What I thought was going to be a good game didn't turn out to be a good game whatsoever. Maryland versus Penn State. And it was terrible. It wasn't worth watching. I'm glad I didn't watch it. I didn't watch this game, but I did watch the condensed version on YouTube. Sadly, I had to suffer through that. I wanted to watch this game, was excited to watch this game, decided to go play basketball instead. Good decision by me because this was atrocious. 59 to nothing Penn State. I took Maryland plus 7 points. I could have taken Maryland plus 50 points and still would have lost. It wasn't close. When out of what I watched, Penn State's just better across the board everywhere you look at. They're better at the quarterback position. They're better at wide receiver. They're better at offensive line, defensive line, cornerback, linebacker, whatever you want to name. The only position you could even debate is running back because of Anthony McFarland for Maryland. But that's about it. They got out athleted. I think Maryland's got ways to go in that department. They have athletes, don't get me wrong, but they don't have Penn State athletes, especially down in the trenches. They lost that war pretty easily. And Maryland didn't really have anything going the whole game other than they did have one drive. They were down, I believe, 14 or 21 to nothing at that point. They started to drive. I believe they were in the red zone. Josh Jackson threw the pick. And from there on out, they didn't have another good drive the rest of the game. They were outgaining this game 619 total yards to 128 total yards. That's almost impossible to do to only get 128 yards in a football game. That's pathetic. Pathetic. The football field itself is 120 yards. So what Maryland did is pretty much go one way and then back the other way 8 yards, and that's all they got the whole game. That's terrible. That's unexcusable for Mike Locksley. He's got to do better than that, especially as an offensive mind. That makes no sense to me. I don't know how that's possible. The one area I do think Penn State needs to work on, though, is rushing. They only average 4.8 yards per carry. You're going to have to get better than that. That's average. Elite teams rush the ball between 6.5 yards to 7.5 yards per carry. Some teams even do better than that, but you have to be somewhere in between there if you want to compete for a college football playoff spot. Before this game, I didn't think Penn State that was possible for them. I think it's possible now. They really impressed me. I don't think Maryland's a terrible team. I think they're a 6-6 team, and you utterly destroyed them. And it's not just this game. Over the last 3 games versus Maryland, you have beat them 163-6. Let's say that again. Over the last 3 games versus Maryland, Penn State has beat them 163-6. That's an average of 54-2 in 3 games. So that means you're averaging a safety a game. So you're not even scoring offensively. You're just scoring because of sheer dumb luck, pretty much, is what you're doing if you average that out. That's insane to me. I've never seen anything like that. Their overall series versus Maryland, Penn State is 40-2, 2 losses in 40 and 1 tie in 43 games. That's crazy. And a lot of this has to do, in my opinion, because there's this story. I don't know if it's been confirmed over the years, but James Franklin was on the staff in 2010 on the Maryland staff, and Ralph Frigden was the head coach at that point. And James Franklin was supposed to become this coach after Ralph Frigden retired. He's kind of lined up coaching, waiting. And Ralph Frigden retired or got fired, whatever, which one it was. He was kind of pushed out the door, but he was allowed to say he retired. And James Franklin had a contract for Maryland, and they kind of backed out of it and hired Randy Edsall instead, the old UConn's head coach. Now UConn's head coach again. And ever since then, James Franklin has dominated Maryland. He was a coach at Vanderbilt for a while, did a good job there, winning 6 to 7 games, especially at a program like Vanderbilt. That's very good. And then since he has come to Penn State, he's absolutely killed Maryland. Like I said, 163-6. 6 points in 3 years. That's ridiculous. I think Penn State's for real. This game changed my mind on them. Going forward, they're going to have some tough games. They play Michigan State, and obviously Ohio State. I'm not sure if they play Wisconsin. That would be a battle for second place in the Big Ten. I think Ohio State's firmly the best team right now. I think Wisconsin and Penn State are battling for second. Michigan State's garbage. They shouldn't even be ranked. They're nowhere near in this conversation. I think Michigan can battle back to get in this conversation, but not right now. Next up, we're going to talk about probably the best game this weekend, and that was Clemson in North Carolina. 21-20 Clemson. This game was even. 322 total yards for Clemson's, 270 yards for North Carolina. Um, first downs were 14 first downs each. So, like I said, split right down the middle. It was an overall good game. Trevor Lawrence struggled again. He made some key throws in the game, made some big-time throws. He can do that. He's the most talented quarterback in college football. Right now, he's playing nowhere near that talent level that we know he has. He was 18 of 30 with 206 yards and 1 touchdown. He also added a rushing touchdown. And then what the hell is going on with Travis Etienne? Supposed to be the best college football running back. Nowhere near it right now. I wouldn't even put him inside the top 5. He's only averaging 4.6 yards per carry, other than the game he had versus Georgia Tech, which inflated his yards per carry average. He averaged 17.1 yards per carry in the game. Since then, I believe his next highest game was like 4.8 yards per carry or 4.9. He's fallen off a cliff. Only 4.6 yards per carry since then. On the season, he's 7.1 because of that game. But he needs to do better. Teams can't, especially teams like North Carolina, can't say, guess what, we're loading the box, we're going to stop you. You know why? Because they have Justin Ross, T. Higgins, Amari Rodgers in the slot. You can't do that. So no team is going in there, we got a game plan to stop this guy. And guess what? He's still getting stopped. To me, he's losing money at this point right now. He's got to play better. The whole offense as a whole is not playing up to their level of what we saw last year. And I didn't expect them to be as good as last year, because once you get film on someone like Trevor Lawrence, you're going to expose their weaknesses. Every quarterback's had to go through this. That's why in the NFL, you never overreact after 1 year. You want to see how they adjust, how the quarterback adjusts to how defense are playing them, and then how defenses adjust back to the quarterback, and then so on and so forth. It's just a cycle. You have to adjust them. They have to adjust you constantly. And so far, he hasn't made that adjustment back. We need to see that from him. I know he can do it. He's got the talent. He's the highest rated quarterback recruit, or second highest rated quarterback recruit coming out of high school ever, behind Vince Young. And then some have him third behind Justin Fields for Ohio State. And we're seeing what he's doing at Ohio State. But Clemson as a whole just has to play better. They're not the number 1 team in the country. They're not now. They're actually, AP ranking obviously came out. This is on Monday night. And they're number 2. I don't even think they're a top 5 team right now. But it says in the AP poll they are, and that's all that matters right now until the college football playoff poll comes out. But they just need to get better as a team. They haven't shown what they're capable of at full capacity yet. And maybe this is full capacity. Maybe this is what they're going to look like. And this is what they're going to look like. They're going to suffer the same fate that I think it's the 2014 or 2015 Florida State Seminoles did, where the year after the national championship they went undefeated but played a god-awful schedule and then got demolished by Oregon in the college football playoff semifinal. Next up, we have Mississippi State at Auburn. Another game I was just totally wrong on. I was wrong. I thought Mississippi State would compete. I actually predicted them to win this game. And the reason I thought that is because I thought Auburn was overhyped at this point. And I also thought there has to be an upset. This was a week of no big games. So there always is 1 or 2 upsets in a week like that. I picked this. I was wrong. I did pick one right. We'll get to that later. But Auburn dominated this game. 567 total yards. Bo Nix had 335 yards passing on 21 attempts, a little bit over 15.5 yards per attempt. He played his best game by far as a college quarterback, and they really proved something to me. They're definitely a top 15 team. Before, I thought they were between the 20 to 30 range. I thought they were a good football team. I never thought they were bad. I never thought, this is a 6-6 team masquerading as a 10-2 team. I never thought that. I thought and my preseason predictions, I have them going 8-4. I think they're either going to go somewhere between 8-4 and 10-2. I don't think they're going 12-0. I don't think they're going 11-1. I could see 10-2 though, but you have to be. I know they have Bama on their schedule. Then they have Florida, LSU, and I think they do have Georgia. I'm not sure, but I think that's their hardest games: Alabama, Georgia, Florida, LSU. You have to go 2-2 if you want in those games just to get to 10-2. I don't see that. I see them going 1-3 in that, and then maybe dropping somewhere else where they're not supposed to, and maybe not. Maybe they only lose those 3 games, so that may put you at 9-3. And to me, if you're 9-3 with 3 of your losses coming to LSU, Georgia, and Alabama, teams that are going to be at the top 10 at the end of the year, you're a top 15 team. You're not. If you're an elite team, you would beat 3 out of the 4. If you're a good team or a really, really good team, you'd beat 2 out of the 4. And if you're good, you'd win 3 out of the 4. And that's what I think, or lose 3 out of 4. That's what I think is going to happen. I think you're only going to win 1 out of those 4 games. I think you'll beat Florida. I think Florida's the most overrated team in the top 25 and in the top, I believe, 13 now. They haven't impressed me whatsoever. They were close versus Miami, who almost lost to Central Michigan. They were close versus Kentucky, who got beat pretty handily by South Carolina and Mississippi State, who are 6-6 teams at best. Auburn's a good team. They shouldn't be ranked 7th. At this point, they should be, but they won't be at the end of the season. They'll probably be in the 12 to 18 range. But a good win for Auburn, in my opinion, especially the way they did it in such a dominating fashion. 56-23, that was a dominant game. They scored 21 points in the first 10 minutes of the game, and by that time it was over. And we'll move on to probably the most dominant performance of the week. The 2 most dominant performances were by Big Ten teams. Ohio State absolutely killed Nebraska, 48-7. I had Nebraska covering the 17.5. Wrong on that game. Domination. What can I say? I learned a lot about Ohio State's defense. They're going to be good. Nebraska is a top 50 offense. They will finish the season in top 50, and you dominated them. You held them to 7 points. Nebraska will probably end up averaging on the season around 30 points, so you held them under, 23 points per average? That's very good, especially on the road. Defense is frail, like I said. Chase Young, the best defensive lineman in college football, going to be a top 5 pick. He's probably better than Nick Bosa and Joey Bosa. Both those guys were injury prone, and to me, both those guys are more power rushers. I think Chase Young can do both. I think he can speed rush, and I think he can power rush. That's the difference there between those two, between those 3, in my opinion. Also, Jeffrey Okudah. Mel Kiper knows what he's doing. At the beginning of the year, he had him in his top 20 prospects. Everyone's like, what has Jeffrey Okudah done? I was kind of saying that, but I also knew his talent level. As a Texas fan, we recruited him. He's from Texas. He's talented as hell. He's a very good cornerback. Out of high school, he was the number 1 rated cornerback coming out, or number 2 cornerback coming out, number 1 in the state of Texas. One of the top 100 highest rated recruits ever. He's special, and he's showing that. He had 2 picks in the game. One of them was lucky. He slipped, but he still caught it on his back. That takes skill. And then the one play was great. He was behind the wide receiver, stepped in front, picked it off. It was a little bit thrown behind by Adrian Martinez, who had the worst game of his career by far. And overall, Ohio State just dominated this game, and they've shown it at every level on defense. Now, this is the week to me where they're going to have to show it on offense for me to believe, because Nebraska's not a good defense. Miami of Ohio is not a good defense. Indiana's not a good defense. Florida Atlantic's not a good defense. Michigan State's a top 15 defense in this country. That's undisputable. They're a top 15 defense, and even top 10 maybe. To me, if they score over 30 points in this game, they're for real. And I think they're going to do that. I do. And when they score 30 points, I want the offense to score 30 points. I don't want the defense intercepting and going in the end zone, counting as points towards the offense. No, I want to see the offense score 30 points in this game. So 4 touchdowns and a field goal, whatever it takes to get there, that'd be 31. I think if they do that, go over 30 points offensively in this game, they're for real overall across the board. And if they do that, they're the most scary team and most complete team in college football. That's the last box I need to check. I need to see how Justin Fields reacts under pressure in a game, under pressure in certain situations, and under pressure in the pocket on a semi-regular basis. Some of those teams that they played before could do it once a quarter. I need to see it once or twice every series. So we'll see if Michigan State can do that. I think they'll be able to do that, but I still think Ohio State's probably going to end up winning that game. Next up, we have Texas Tech versus Oklahoma, and Oklahoma's defense has improved. That's undeniable at this point. As a Texas fan, that hurts me to say a lot. That Red River game is going to be fun in 2 weeks. I can't wait for it. It's the most anticipated game between those two teams in over a decade. 2009 was probably the last time. 2008 and 2009 were the most fun I've had watching these games back to back. One was a high-scoring shootout in 2008. One was a defensive struggle in 2009. Fun games to watch. Maybe we can beat the back-to-back games, because last year was a hell of a game. 48-35 Texas wins on a last-second kick. Maybe we can do the same thing this year, make it a little more interesting, maybe make it a little more low-scoring, because that game was boring between second and third quarter. Texas kind of took control of that game, but then Oklahoma and Kyler Murray came storming back. So maybe that game will be a little bit closer, but I digress. Let's stay focused on this game. Like I said, Oklahoma's defense has improved. They won 51-46 versus Texas Tech. Now, it was on the road, but that's still a lot less points than they gave up this year. This year, they won 55-16, so almost the same offensive output, even more points actually, but 30 less points on defense allowed. Again, it was at home this time for Oklahoma. Texas Tech doesn't have Antoine Wesley, their leading receiver last year, but they do still have T.J. Vasher on the outside. But that gives you 2 dominant wide receivers instead of 1. And then DeLeon Ward, their starting running back, transfer. And Jet Duffy started this game this year, and he started the game last year because Alan Bowman was hurt. So really, there are some parallels you can draw. I think if you add those guys back on to Texas Tech, they probably score, and put them back at home again, they probably score 30 points, but still, that's 16 points less than they did this year if you try to make the scenario pretty much the same. And that's a lot better. I mean, if you're giving, I think their average last year was around 38 points per game. So if they are, 38 points per game allowed. So if you're giving up 22, 23, Oklahoma's going to win a lot of football games like that. They're easily going to put up 30 on pretty much everyone they play, especially this year. I don't see a defense, even Ohio State, I don't think could hold Oklahoma under 30 points. So we'll have to see what they do in the future. But for right now, I say that defense is much improved. I think it will be. I don't think they'll really be tested in the Big 12 that much because the Big 12 is kind of down this year. Other than a couple teams, I think Baylor may give them a little bit of trouble. Oklahoma State and Texas, though, will be the 2 biggest tests they have for that defense to see if they've actually improved. They definitely need to give up less than 48 points to Texas if they want to win that game, too, because I don't see Oklahoma putting up more than 48 against the Texas defense. Texas defense is okay, so I don't see them giving up more than 48 points. Next, we'll have Virginia and Notre Dame. This was just a matter of Notre Dame imposing their will on defense. I think Notre Dame is kind of in the same boat my Texas Longhorns are in. If you just put their starters out there and they can play the whole game, you know how you can do that on video games where you can turn off the fatigue. If you could do that with Notre Dame and Texas, I think they could compete with Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, and win most of those games, to be honest with you. I think they're just as talented. They're starting 22. The problem is, with my Texas Longhorns and Notre Dame, we don't have the depth on talent. Texas is getting there next year, especially if the recruiting class stays same or even gets better. It's going to be another top 5 class that will pretty much put them up with the elite. That would be 3 top 5 classes in a row. That gets you to where you need to be depth wise. Notre Dame, on the other hand, it's hard because every couple years you're going to have to get really talented and really smart kids in there, and that doesn't happen every recruiting cycle. That's kind of an every other year thing. As you see in the recruiting rankings, they kind of go from around 8 to 9 to around 18 to 19. They shuffle a lot, whereas the really elite teams always stay in the top 10. So I don't think Notre Dame will ever be up to that. But this team is very good. This team is the best team Brian Kelly's ever had, and they proved it. They had 8 sacks versus Virginia, and Virginia is a good football team. They're definitely a top 25 team. They're the second best team in a god-awful ACC, yes, but they are still the second best team in that conference, and they're a top 25 team, and you dominate them at the line of scrimmage. Bryce Perkins had his worst game of his probably college career, 5 total turnovers, 3 fumbles, 2 interceptions. And the difference in the game was Virginia fumbled 4 times, lost 3 of them. Notre Dame fumbled 4 times, lost 1 of them. That's the difference. And the final score in that game was 35-20. And to me, like I said, that was the biggest difference. Ian Book did what he normally does. He's a game manager. He's Jake Fromm to me. I don't think either of them are great quarterbacks, but they knew enough to get the job done with what's around them. And that's all you're going to need. You need to get wins. That's all that matters. And he does that pretty well, so does Jake Fromm. So I think Notre Dame, again, I think they're definitely a top 15 team this year. I think this is the best team Brian Kelly's had. And I expect them to probably win out, other than maybe the Michigan game where they could slip up. USC's playing well right now, too, but USC's going to have to get their quarterback, Slovis, back before that game because Matt Fink's not winning that game as a third-string quarterback. He played pretty well versus Washington, and that's a nice segue into the next game. And I know I said he played pretty well. He did. For a third-string quarterback versus, in my opinion, what's going to end up being a top 10 team in Washington, a team that's going to win the Pac-12, a team that I had before the season in the college football playoff, and that's still possible if they win out. He played pretty well in those circumstances. On the road, at Washington versus, in my opinion, what's going to be a top 10 team. He had 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. So, again, you look at those stats. If that was a starter, that would be bad. But this is your third-string quarterback. He's a third string for a reason, and he played like a third string would. So, I hold him up to that status instead of a starter. Like I said, he threw 3 interceptions, and this game all swung on a matter of a couple plays. Washington's going in to score. I believe the score was 7-0 at that point. They handed off. Ahmed fumbles in the end zone. I don't know who. I think it might have been Aaron Fuller recovers in the end zone. Touchdown. Washington goes up 14-0. Then there's another one. I think it's 17-7 at this point. It's 20-7. USC's going in to score. Matt Fink drops back to pass, throws a slant. The nickel corner reads it perfectly, and I don't even know how he knew this was coming. But he looked in. He must have read the quarterback's eyes. He read it, dropped back right into the throwing lane, picked it off. Michael Pittman Jr. makes the tackle to keep him from going the other way, but they take over around, I believe, the 5. 2 plays later, an 89-yard run by Salvin Ahmed, and the game's pretty much over at that point. It's 7 at that point, and then USC comes back later in the game, throws a touchdown to Michael Pittman, and that was done with the scoring. So it ends up being 28-14. There was a couple, like I said, those 2 plays really changed the game. You fumble in the red, or you throw an interception in the red zone. 2 plays later, they take it for a touchdown. They fumble in the red zone, and they recover their own fumble for a touchdown. That's 2 huge swing plays. Clay Helton, this is another point. Clay Helton, USC coach, does not deserve to be fired. This team has fought for him. They have played hard for him. They have won games they probably shouldn't have. They beat Utah at home. Utah's a good top 20 football team. And I think USC's probably going to end up going 8-4, 9-3. And to me, he should, and that's with a third string and a backup quarterback handling the reins of the offense for this, and Graham Harrell in his first year. I would give him 1 more year. And guess what? If you really want Urban Meyer, guess what? Tell him, hey, wait 1 more year. You can have the job next year if he doesn't work out. Or, the year after if he doesn't work out. And guess what? Urban Meyer's going to be there. Urban Meyer's not going anywhere. I don't see any jobs opening that he'd be interested in unless Florida State opens, but they're starting to play better football right now. And I really don't think Florida State wants to pay all that money to Willie Taggart to buy him out. So I think they'd rather, if he goes 8-4 this year, keep him. So, and if that happens, Urban Meyer's not going to, I don't know, Tennessee. I don't see that. So I think USC, if I'm USC, I wait another year, see what happens. If he goes 10-2, keep him. If he goes 8-4 again, get rid of him. It's unfair to me to predeterminedly fire a guy because he wasn't your guy in the first place. If he's producing, if he goes 8-4 with this football team with a third string quarterback, he deserves to stay, especially when the kids are fighting for him. But I'll move on from that. The next game I want to talk about, Kansas State versus Oklahoma State. Kansas State's first game ranked. Probably will be their last game ranked. I don't think they'll be ranked again this year. I see Oklahoma State being better than them in the Big 12. I see Baylor being better than them in the Big 12. And then I could see Iowa State and Kansas State fighting for the 5th place spot in the Big 12. Oklahoma State should have been ranked. Oklahoma State's a top 20 football team. They're a really good football team. They're going to be scary good if Tylan Wallace comes back next year because they'll have Spencer Sanders as a redshirt sophomore for next year and Chuba Hubbard in his junior year, and then Tylan Wallace would be a senior. That would be the best trio in college football next year, in my opinion. Chuba Hubbard, what can I say? The guy has 938 yards rushing through 4 games. Let me repeat that. 938 yards rushing through 4 games. He's on pace for about 2,000 yards in his sophomore season. And he's averaging a ridiculous 7.3 yards per carry and 10 touchdowns. They dominated this game. They had 526 total yards to 244. First downs was 21-8. The only thing they had the only thing Kansas State won was the turnover battle. They won 2-1, but they couldn't do anything with the ball. Couldn't do anything with the ball. Skylar Thompson was 11 of 23, under 50% passing for 118 yards, and only averaged 3.4 yards a carry as a team. That's not good enough to win, especially on the road. That's not good enough to win at home versus most teams, other than maybe Kansas and West Virginia in the Big 12, who are probably the 2 worst teams. Even though West Virginia is 3-1, they're not a good football team. Oklahoma State, like I said, they're a really good team. They're going to be really good next year. I see them, Oklahoma, and Texas competing for the Big 12 next year. This year, I think it's just Oklahoma and Texas, unless Oklahoma State beats Oklahoma, which it is at home, and it is possible. They always play hard for some. It's a rivalry game. Most of the time, rivalry games are close. I think it will be close. I just think Oklahoma will end up winning that game. But I think Oklahoma State's going to be favored here on out in every game they play in, other than maybe Baylor. Baylor's a pretty good team. They should be ranked. I think they're going to end up going 9-3, 8-4, and if you're 8-4 in the Big 12, you're going to be ranked at the end of the year. I think Oklahoma State's 9-3, 10-2. I think maybe their only other loss comes to either at Baylor or versus Oklahoma. If they lose both of those games, guess what? You're 9-3, and that'd be 3 losses versus 3 ranked teams. So that wouldn't be a bad year at all. Next up, a couple teams that I was just talking about. Iowa State at Baylor. I predicted this game 100% right. Thought Baylor would win. I projected the score right, 23-21 Baylor. I predicted it all right. And it pretty much went the way I thought it was going to go. I thought Baylor and Iowa State are probably the 2 best defensive teams in the Big 12. And they played like it. It was a low-scoring game. There wasn't even any points until the second quarter. It was 7-0 Baylor at halftime, and they blocked a kick of Iowa State with 3 seconds left in the half. Denzel Mims doing what Denzel Mims does, 2 touchdowns in the game, over 80 yards receiving. He's a big play threat, good player. Charlie Brew at quarterback played really well, played a little bit better than Brock Purdy, just enough better. Especially, I don't know what Brock Purdy was doing later in the game. A costly turnover, trying to get rid of the ball, just dumps it, and it flutters, and a guy makes a... Now, this linebacker made a great play. I've never seen a linebacker catch it and drag his feet, drug both of his feet for the interception, which would have counted in the NFL. And then Baylor went up in this game 20-0. Iowa State came back, scored 21 straight points in the fourth quarter, and then Baylor kicked a field goal with a little over, I believe, 25 seconds left in the game, and went up 23-21. Iowa State had a chance. Purdy dropped back to pass around between the 30 and 40 yard line, and he got sacked, lost the ball, and Baylor covered and pretty much ended the game. It was an even game. The total yards were 411 to 405. Time of possession was 29 minutes and 43 seconds for Iowa State. Baylor was 30 minutes, 17 seconds. And first downs were 23 to 24. Baylor won that. It was an even game by two good football teams. Not really good. They're good football teams. I think Iowa State's probably going to go 7-5, 8-4. But listen to this. They could go 7-5 and their 5 losses come to Iowa, Baylor, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, and Texas. That could be 5 ranked teams, and there's no shame in that. And then Baylor, I think, is going to go either 8-4 or 9-3, and I think their losses are going to come to around the same opponents, either Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, Texas. Those are their 3 losses. If you want to throw another one in there, maybe Kansas State. I don't really see that happening. I think they'll end up probably going 9-3. Iowa State is a good football team, though. I mean, I think they can go 8-4. I think they can upset someone, and like I said, that's a good year for Iowa State. 8-4 is always a good year. 7-5 is kind of like the average now for them since Matt Campbell's been there. He's a really good head coach. Will probably get hired away by someone else at some point. But overall, the game went how I think it was supposed to go. I think if these teams played 10 times, you get 5 wins for each team. I think they're very evenly matched. I think they're probably the 4th and 5th best teams in the Big 12. Well, Baylor won, so you have to put them 4th, and then the 5th team would be Iowa State. I think it goes Oklahoma, Texas, 1 or 2. We'll find out in 2 weeks, and then we'll probably find out again in the Big 12 championship game. They'll probably play each other again. And then Oklahoma State, Baylor, Iowa State. Now, Baylor and Oklahoma State play later, and that may determine the 3rd spot. And I may be wrong. Maybe Baylor's better than Oklahoma State. My eye test tells me I think Oklahoma State's a little bit better because I think their skill position players are better. I would take Tylan Wallace over Denzel Mims, and I would take Chuba Hubbard over anyone. I think Chuba Hubbard's the best running back in the country at this point. Maybe second. I would actually take Jonathan Taylor at Wisconsin over him, but he's definitely second at this point in the country. And you can even debate first because I think if you put Chuba Hubbard at Wisconsin, I think he'd run for the same amount of yards Jonathan Taylor does. That will do it for my recap of College Football Week 5. Thanks for watching. Please hit that like button. I hope you like the content. Please subscribe. Thank you.